Good morning, everyone. The subject that we are going to discuss for today is the Asian Studies. Let me introduce first my co-speaker. First, we have Miss Rose Antumake. She will discuss the civilization in East Asia. Second, Miss Sharmi Morales, civilization in Southeast Asia. And the third one is Miss April Rose Tuplano, civilization in Southwest Asia. And lastly, Melanie Timachanzo, I am going to discuss the geographical features and evolution of early man in Asia. So in the first chapter, we have the topic of geographical features. So let's proceed to the chapter review. Chapter review. Geography comes from the two Greek words. First, geo means earth, then graphein means to write or to describe. It says that geography deals with the description of the earth into continent, region, countries, landforms, and the relation of these geographic features to the way of life of the people in the specific area. In this chapter, it summarized the geography and physical feature of the Asia, focusing on its landforms and bodies of water. So first, what is geographical features? Geographical features are defined as a natural and man-made resource that can be found on the Earth's surface. This natural is the water forms and the land forms. And the man-made resource, example of this is the canal. Is anything you find outside, such as body of water, land formation, or even artificial structure. Next, are commonly used to help people better understand the map. So, as we can see as the map, there is a different landforms that we can see and landforms and water forms. So, proceed to the physical feature of Asia. At the right side top, we can see the continent of the world. So the blue one is the Asia. Asia is the largest continent in the earth. It almost entirely in the northern hemisphere and occupies 1/3 of the land surface of the earth and contains 2/3 of its people. The surface of Asia extends up to 49,694,700 square meters. So proceed to the geographical region of Asia. So in the left side below, it is the Asia continent. There are 5 region of Asia. So it says that Asia is divided into 5 regions. East Asia, the yellow one, South Asia, the red one, Southeast Asia is the dark yellow, and West Asia is the green one, and the North Asia is the blue. So divided into 5 major physical regions. First, plateau, plain, steppes, and desert, and the water forms environment and the salt water environment. So proceed to the land formation. Land formation. First is the mountain system. So the mountain described. Mountain is a landform that rises prominently above its surroundings, generally exhibiting steep slopes and the relative confirmed area. The first mountain is Himalaya Mountain. It is about 2,500 km or 1,550 miles. It is the separating the Indian continent from the rest of the Asia. The Indian subcontinent, once connected to the Africa, collided with the Eurasian continent up to 50 million to 55 million years ago. So it says now the highest mountain summit in the world was Mount Everest, which stands 8,850 meters or 29,035 feet. So the belt contains 9 of the highest peaks in the world. Next is the Tin Shan Mountain. This time stretched for about 2,400 km or 1,500 miles and straddling the border between Kazakhstan and China. So the Tian means celestial mountain in Chinese. It is the two highest peak of the Tian Shan are Victory Peak, which stands 7,439 meters, and the Kantangiri Peak, which stands for 6,995 meters. So the next mountain that we have is the Ural Mountains, runs for approximately 2,500 km or 1,550 miles in an indirect north-south line from Russia to Kazakhstan. So the first one, yung nasa taas po, yung nasa left side is the Himalayas Mountain. And yung nasa katabi po is yung Mount Everest. And yung nasa baba po sa left side is the Tin Shan Mountain. And the lastly, right side sa baba is the Ural Mountain. So let's proceed to the plateaus. So it says daw that Asia is the home of many plateaus, areas of relatively level high ground. So it's an area of highlands that is raised significantly above the surrounding of the area. So there are two major types of plateau. The first one is dissected plateaus and the volcanic plateaus. The first plateau that we have is the Iranian. It covers more than 3.6 million square kilometers or 1.4 million square miles, encompassing of Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan. So the plateau is not uniformly flat but contains some mountain and low river basins. The highest peak of the Madhab is 5,610 meters. So the next plateau is the Deccan. It makes up of the southern part of India. The plateau average elevation is about 600 meters or 2,000 feet. It is the border of the three range, the Satpura range in the north and the eastern and western Ghats on either side. So next one is the Tibetan Plateau. Is usually considered as the largest and the highest area ever to exist in the history of the earth, known as the rooftop of the world. So the plateau covers an area about half the size of the contiguous United States and average more than 5,000 meters. So the Tibetan Plateau is extremely important to the world water cycle because of this tremendous number of glaciers. The glaciers contain the largest volume of ice outside the poles. The ice and the snow from these glaciers feeds Asia's longest river, so the Tibetan is the largest river in the Asia. So proceed to the plains and steppe and desert. First is the West Siberian. It is located in the central Russia. It is considered one of the largest area of the continuous flatlands. So it extends from north to south about 2,400 kilometers or 1,500 miles, and from the west is 1,900 kilometers and 1,200 miles, with more than 50% of its area and less than 100 meters or 330 feet above sea level. The plain contains some of this world's largest swamps and the flood plains. So in the Central Asia is dominated by steppes landscape, a large area of flat and forest grassland. Mongolia can be divided into different steppe zones: the mountain forest steppes, the arid steppes, and the desert steppes. So lastly, the Ras Al Khali desert, considered the world's largest sand sea, covers an area larger than France across Saudi Arabia, Oman, and United Arab Emirates and Yemen. It holds roughly as much sand as African Sahara's desert, even though it is 15 times smaller in the size. So let's proceed to the water formation. So are you still listening? If you are still listening and active listening, kindly type water formation in the comment section. So okay, thank you. Let's have a proper discussion. So first is what fresh water. There's a picture above the right and sa baba meron din. So first is Lake Baikal. It is located in the southern Russia. It is the deepest lake in the world. It reaches a depth of 1,620 meters or 5,315 feet. So yung nasa taas po, yung nasa right side, sa yung Lake Baikal. So second one is the Yangtze River. It is the longest river in the Asia and the third longest in the world, behind the Amazon of South America and the Nile of Africa. So it reached 6,300 kilometers or 3,915 miles in length. So next, the Yellow River. So the Yellow River can found in the Huanghe, which is 4,700 kilometers long, originates from the Tibetan Plateau. So next is the Mekong River, comes from the eastern Tibet and flows southeast to South China Sea. And the Ganges River, the last one is the Ganges River, rises in the western of Himalayas and passes eastward through India and joins to the Brahmaputra River and the northern portion of the Bay of Bengal. So the next river that we have is the Indus River. It is emerged from the western end of the Himalayas and flows through Jammu, Kashmir and Pakistan and empties into the Arabian Sea. So next is the Tigris and the Euphrates River began in the highland of eastern Turkey and flowed through Syria and Iraq, joining in the city of Qara, Iraq before emptying into the Persian Gulf. It is the Tigris and the Euphrates River are the land between the two rivers known as Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia was the center of the earliest civilization during the time. It includes the two empires, the Akkadian and the Sumerian. Today, the Tigris and Euphrates River system is under threat from increased agricultural and industrial use. This pressure have caused desertation and increased salt in the soil, severely damaged local watershed habitat. So next is the salt water. So the Persian Gulf has an area of more than 234,000 square kilometer or 90,000 square miles. So it borders the Iran, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq. The Gulf is subject to high rates of evaporation, making it shallow and extremely salty. So yung Persian Gulf is nasa left side sa baba, and the one picture is the Sea of Okhotsk. The Sea of Okhotsk cover 1.5 million square kilometer or 611,000 square miles between the Russian mainland and the Kamchatka Peninsula. So the Bay of Bengal is the largest bay in the world, covering about 2.2 million square kilometer or 839,000 square miles, and bordering Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and Burma. Next is the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on the earth and thus is known as the deepest lake in the world, which is 408 meters below sea level. And the last one is the Caspian Sea, is the largest saltwater lake in the world. So let's proceed. So before to proceed in the implication of Asia, landforms and waterforms of the life of the Asians, kindly comment down below or give example of landforms and bodies of water. Okay. So let's proceed. Implication of Asian landforms and waterforms on life of Asians. It says that Asian landforms and waterforms have great environment diversity. Therefore, it is just realistic and consider landforms and waterforms to have different implication of the life of its people. So these landforms and waterforms have important part to the way of living of the people of the Asian. So Asia's mountain areas are usually considered to be the refuge of minority people. So mountain range provided a passage for migratory people, thereby helping us conclude that mountains do not actually become barrier to human movement. Therefore, most of the people in Asia get their foods in the mountain. Next is the same mountain range have also served as highway for caravans. So it says though that Asia's mountains are usually considered to be refuge of minority people. Historically, was from the arid mountains of North Asia that nomadic Mongol hordes spilled over into the south and west to create vast empire. So mountain ranges provide a passage for migratory people, thereby helping us conclude that mountains do not actually become barrier to the human movement. So therefore, the habitation of the Mongoloid and Caucasian descent of the south and eastern parts are the Himalayas mountain. Other Asian highlands are classified as areas nomadic herding, which is most extensive in the North and West Asia. The next bracket is the same mountain range have also served as highway for caravan. So, sinasabing ang Silk Road daw ay ang Silk Road ng mga nakaraang panahon ay siyang dinadaanan ng mga ngalakal sa pakikipagpalitan ng mga produkto. Then forest and minerals too constitute an important resource in the Asian mountain. Bakit kaya? So sinasabi yung Asia yung may pinakamaliking land area, kung kaya't maraming nakukuhang produkto sa mga kabundukan. At mineral din sapagkat ang Asia ay napapalibutan ng anyong tubig o ng dagat. So agriculture is most important economic activity in Asia. It consists of 60% of the working population is engaging in farming due to the land formation. Countries of Asia produce 80% of the world's supply of rice, in addition to the commercial crops grown primarily in the southern and eastern Asia. So the continent, plains, and plateaus have become livestock grazing areas. Farmers raise livestock animals mainly to help them with their work for milk, cheese, meat, for fertilize, and all times cooking and fuel. So sinasabi daw na Asia's river are lifeblood of its people. So bakit kaya? Ang mga tao daw ay nakadepende sa tubig, pagkain, at pangunahing pangangailangan ng mga Asian people. They do take their waters to irrigate crops. This explains that the development of early civilization in the great rivers of Asia was not accident. It was the river valley of Tigris, Euphrates. Rivers were Mesopotamia and other civilization. So Asian also takes their river their religion. So bakit? Sinasabi daw na ang Ganges River ng India ay kilala sa bilang spiritual na river, kung saan nagsisilbi itong importante, kung saan ang Ganges River daw ay isa sa mga importante sa mga Hinduism, kung saan who say prayers and make offering of flower or food to eat. So, ayan po yung reference ng chapter 1. So, let's proceed to the chapter 2, which is the evolution of early man in Asia. So, evolution of early man in Asia. Ang geologist daw ang siyang nag-aaral ng mga earth crust. Sila ay naniniwala na ang mundo ay mahigit 5 bilyong taon na. It is theorized that out of the glowing mass of gas and steam that cooled the earth came the ocean and the seas that covers the earth. So in this chapter, it summarized the beginning of the human species in Asia, the long Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, then the Neolithic evolution. So let's proceed. First is creationism and evolutionism. So it says that creationism, we are in the 18th century, and the dominant ideas in Europe are the living things have been created as we know for them. They are immutable and don't change a long time. These ideas are based in Jewish of Christian belief taken from the Genesis, and according to it, the world and everything on it was created in 6 days and would be only some 6,000 years ago. So God created species as they and now, and they are immutable. They haven't changed. Next, the evolutionism. So, sabi daw, creationism was objected by evolutionism, a new vision that started to spread since the 18th and mostly during the 19th century. For evolutionists, scientists, living things have changed a long time from the other that had existed before and produced new and different species, more and more complex. So, sila ang tatlong evolutionist scientists, si Lamarck, Darwin, and Wallace. So, the first evolutionist is Lamarck, 1744 to 1829. So, in 1800s, he gave a lecture where he exposed a coherent theory to explain the transformation of living things. He admitted the existence of the evolution of species and tried to give a rational explanation to it. So, Lamarck's is based on the following ideas. So, he has 5 ideas. First is the environment changes. May pagbabago daw ang ating environment. Second is living things need to adapt to these changes. And the third is, in order to adapt, living things are some organs better than others, used and disused. And the fourth one is, organs more frequently used to develop and strengthen, and the most less used atrophy and weaken. And the fifth one is, characters achieved or lost by living things along their life are transferred to their descendant in inheritance or acquired characteristic. So according to Lamrick, initially giraffe had a short neck, but they should have stretched it as they needed to extend it to get food from the tree leaves, and their descendants will have inherent their future. So therefore, yung giraffe daw, mababa lang yung kanilang lieg, kung kaya't ang kanilang mga kinakain ay ang mga dahon sa puno, kung kaya't kinakailangan nilang itaas ang kanilang lieg upang maabot ang kanilang pagkain. So next one is Charles Darwin. So in 1831, he enlisted on the survey ship and HMS Beagle as the naturalist without a salary to started scientific expedition around the world. In this voyage, he made an important geological and biological observation. So in 1836, when he was back in England, he was devoted to gather his ideas regarding changes in species. In 1859, he published his theory. This theory named The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. So this book opened a great debate and signified a major revolution in human thinking. He died on April 19, 1882, and she was buried at Westminster Abbey. So the next evolutionist is Alfred Russel. Alfred Russel Wallace was born on January 18, 1823 at USK Wallace. In 1846, he made an expedition to River Amazon kasama si Henry Walter Bates, kung siya rin ay isang naturalist. From 1851 till 1862, he commanded the research at the Malaysian Isles. At that time, he was formulated his theory of the natural selection. In 1858, he told his ideas to Darwin. So, kung saan, 1858, he told his ideas to Darwin, while Alfred Russel told his ideas to Darwin. So, kung saan, mayroon ng Darwin-Wallace theory is based from the ideas. So, ano yung mga ideas na ito? Yung una is most species produce in great amounts. Second, resource, the food trees, etc. are limited also. And the third one is the individual of one species are not alike among them. There is always some variability. Some variation are transferred to the descendant. And the fourth one is the struggle for survival. So, kinakailangan daw natin ng mga problema o struggle upang ma-survive natin. Individual must overcome condition imposed by environment to survive. And the fifth one is the environment favors survival. Those that have the best adaptation to environmental condition. And the sixth one is the natural selection. Last is their descendant inherent in the feature from the ancestor. So, to see if you are listening, kindly comment down to the comment section who are the three evolutionist scientists. There are only three. And the one combines their ideas. Comment down below po. Then, let's proceed to the topic 2, Asia as the home of the early man. So, the direct ancestor of the human species seems to clearly to have evolved first in East Africa some 3 million years ago. After another million years ago, or perhaps more, this creature is known as Homo erectus. This Homo erectus is slightly smaller than modern humans, but walking erect, using fire, and making crude stone tools had spread to Asia and Europe. So, yan. Yung picture is the upright man. So, yung upright man, yung female weight consists of 52 kilograms or 115, and the average of 1.5 meter or 4.9 feet yung kanyang taas. Then sa lalaki naman, yung timbang niya ay inaabot ng 58 kilograms at yung kanyang taas ay inaabot naman ng 5.6 feet. So, sinasabing ang upright man daw ay maliit lamang ang kanilang brain cell when compared to the later two Homo sapiens and used simple tools. The next one is the Homo erectus. It is the earliest human fossil found outside the Africa or skull and mandibles of Asian Homo erectus from the Manisi, modern Republic of Georgia in Caucasus. So, parehas lang yung skull ng Homo erectus gorgeous sa Asian Homo erectus from the missing. So they have chest or skull and lower less dome cranium, bigger brow bridge, and thick cranial walls and bigger face. There were also some remains that look similar to the eragster. Yung eragster is yung nasa right side, then ito yung nasa left is the Homo erectus. So, Homo erectus javaman. So, the Homo erectus javaman was the oldest Southeast Asian Homo sapiens. Siya yung pinakauna. So, they are known as Peking man. They are known as Peking man. So, sinasabi daw na natagpuan daw ang Homo erectus javaman sa volcanic debris in Java, Indonesia. Sa Indonesia siya natagpuan. The species was believed to live for at least several 100,000 years in China and possibly until 200,000 years ago in Indonesia. A skull was found in central China that was similar to the Homo heidelbergensis. So next is the Homo sapien. So between 600,000 and 100,000 years ago, Homo sapien came to Southeast Asia by migrating from Africa. Nag-migrate lang daw yung Homo sapien. Noon ay nasa Africa sila, then lumipat lamang sa Southeast Africa kung saan sila ay nakilala bilang out of Africa. They migrated through the Middle East on their way out of Africa about 10,000 years ago. Human migrated into inland Asia, likely by followed herd by bison and mammoth, and arrived in the southeast Siberia about 43,000 years ago, and some people moved south or east from there. So, by about 40,000 years ago, Homo sapien made it to the Indonesia, where a skull was found in the Borneo and Nia cave. So, yung bungo daw ng Homo sapien ay natagpuan sa Indonesia, sa Borneo cave. So, Homo sapien, may average sila na 57 kilograms. And then, yung taas nila naman ay 5.2 feet. Mas matangkad sila doon sa nauna. Then, the male weight, an average of 65 kilograms or 146. And the average of 5.6 feet tall. The Homo sapien had larger brain and used more complex tools, including blades, awls, and microliths out of altars, bones, and ivory. So, they were the only hominids to develop language, make clothes, create shelters, and store food, underground preservation. In additional language was formed, ritual was created, and art was made. So, sila yung kumbaga updated na sila. Marunong na sila mag-suot ng damit. Yung language na meron na rin, and nakakagawa na rin sila ng kanilang shelter na kanilang titirahan. So, let's proceed to the Paleolithic Age. This is the lesson 3 that we have. So, Paleolithic Age or the Old Stone Age. So, first is the Paleolithic Society. Paleolithic Society is a typically Paleolithic society follow the hunter-gathered economy. So, sinasabi na yung human hunted wild animals for meat and gather food, firewoods, and materials for their tools, cloth, and shelter. As the Paleolithic era progressed, dwelling became more sophisticated, more elaborated, and core houses-like. At the end of the Paleolithic era, humans began to produce and began to engage in religious behavior. So, this human began to produce a work. Example nito ay may mga cave paintings, rock arts, and jewelry. And they began to engage in the religious behavior such as burial and ritual system that they have. So, proceed to dwelling and shelter. So, early man chose location that could be defended against predator and rival. So, many of these campsites have been destroyed. So, pinipili daw nila yung mga kanilang lokasyon or matitirahan kung saan wala sila ng mga kaaway, kung saan madidefended nila yung kanilang mga predators. As early as 3800 BCE, human began constructing temporary food huts. So, nagsimula na silang gumawa ng kanilang tirahan. So, karamihan daw sa dwelling and shelter, karamihan daw na mga bahay ay matatagpuan malapit sa ilog, sa river, lakes, and stream. Perhaps, which low hilltops nearby that could serve as refuge kung saan yung tubig mas malapit sa kanila. Since water can erode and change landscape equate drastically, many of these campsites have been destroyed. So the oldest example are shelter within caves, followed by houses of wood, straw, and rats. So proceed to the Paleolithic artifacts. So there are a number of artifacts that range from stone bones and wood tools to stone sculpture. So first, subdivision. There are 3 subdivisions. First, lowered or early Paleolithic, and the second one is the middle Paleolithic, and the third one is the upper or the late Paleolithic. So dito sa lower or early Paleolithic, from the earliest known tools are around 2,600 million years ago. It is only simplifies the coarse flakes, pieces, and later large bifaces up to roughly 2,500 years ago. Next, in the middle Paleolithic, from 250,000 years ago, with a new focus of retouched flakes and prepared coarse, which continued to be popular on the certain areas until 30,000 years ago. So in the upper to late Paleolithic, it is the beginning to pop up around 50,000 or 40,000 years ago. These industries saw a huge proliferation of regards to both tool shape and source materials. So next is the New Stone Age. So in the New Stone Age, or also known as Neolithic era, the people learn how to train animals. They trained animals. So the people of the New Stone Age also learn how to train animals to be useful to humans. So natuto na silang i-train yung kanilang mga alagang hayop upang may pakinabang naman ito sa kanila. The training crops and animals is called domestication. No one is sure which animals was the first to domesticated by humans. At one time, all animals are wild. Experts think that the dog could have been at the first domesticated animals. How do you think that domesticated dog was useful at the stone? So the next is, they created a rule. This rule named live in a city. So sinasabi dito na during the Neolithic era, ang mga tao daw ay kinakailangan nila ng kooperasyon. They most likely created rules to live by to get together along with each other. So yung mga tao dito nagtutulungan upang maisalba ang kanilang buhay sa pang-araw-araw. This lead to civilization, which is actually means to live in a city. So at the end of the Neolithic era, people began to use tools made from the metal. So this is the link or the reference that we have in this module. So that's all. Thank you. Then let's proceed to the
Good afternoon, classmates. For the continuation of the discussion about the Asian studies, I will now discuss the civilization in Southwest Asia. First, I will be discussing the Asian civilization. Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is thought to be one of the places where early civilization developed. It is a historic region of West Asia within the Tigris-Euphrates river system. The word Mesopotamia means between rivers in Greek. It is a home to the ancient civilization of Sumer, Assyria, and Babylonia. Next is the Sumerians and their culture. The Sumerians built their cities in this fertile area of Sumer from the east. Their culture was believed to be rich and highly developed. Good soil was the advantage that attracted these settlers to the flat, swampy land of Sumers. But however, they also have a disadvantages in their environment, like the flooding of the rivers was unpredictable. And the Sumerian farmers need the water during the dry summer months to make their crops grow. The Sumerian was also a small region to cluster the huts standing in the middle of the open plain. With no barriers of protection, a Sumerian village was almost defenseless. The natural resources of Sumer were extremely limited. Without good supply of stone, wood, and metal, the Sumerians had nothing to use for tools or buildings. But after a period of time, the Sumerians finally created the solution of their problems. They dug irrigation ditches that carried water to their field and allowed them to produce surplus crops. They also built city walls with mud bricks. And they also know how to trade with the people in the mountain and the desert for the product they lack, like grains, cloths, and crafted stone with wood and metals they needed to make for their tools and buildings. Next is the social structure. As you can see, they have 4 levels of social structure, which is the priest and king is the highest, and next as merchants and farmers, slave, who were either captured in war or sold into slavery to pay their debts. Next is the Sumerian belief system. The Sumerians were actually polytheists or believers of many gods. They believed that there were gods of sea, earth, and sky. They believed that their gods were powerful and immortal, and that the power of their gods were absolute. It was their belief that at any moment, a god's anger would strike, sending floods or fire on an enemy to destroy their cities. To pacify their gods, they built the surrogates. and made offerings and sacrifices of goat and sheep. Next is the Sumerian city-state. The Sumerians were known as one of the first group of people to form a civilization. The Sumerians established the first city-states, which is the Ur, the oldest city, which is Ur. The people of the city-state believed that each city-state belonged to a god or gods, and their type of government of the city-state was theocracy. In this type of government, the high priest was considered as the city governor. He performed administrative duties such as the supervision of the irrigation system, but in times of war, the priest did not lead the city. Instead, the men of the city chose a top fighter who could command the city's soldiers. At first, a commander's power ended as soon as a war was over, and after 3000 BCE, wars between cities became more and more frequent. Gradually, Sumerian priests and the people gave commanders permanent control of standing armies. Some military leaders became full-time rulers. The rulers usually passed their power on their sons, who eventually passed it on their heirs, such as series of rulers from a single family is called a dynasty. And between 3000 to 2500 BCE, many Sumerian city-states came under the rule of dynasties. The Sumerian science and technology. The Sumerians invented the form of writing called cuneiform, found scripted on the Boyston Rock. Cuneiform in Latin is canus, which means wedge shape. It is a form of writing on wet clay tablets using wedge-like writing tool called stylus. The Sumerians were the first people, also the first people who discovered bronze. The Sumerians also invented several important architectural elements such as rounded roof in the shape of domes or vaults. The most striking Sumerian structure were the ziggurat. The Sumerians also developed some of the principles of algebra, and in mathematics, they used the sexagesimal system based on the number of 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and so on. They also developed the lunar calendar with 12 months, then added a 13th month to line it with the season. Next is the Akkadian. About 2350 BCE, Sargon defeated the city-state of Sumer. Sargon led his army from Akkad, a city-state north of Sumer. The Akkadians were Semitic people, that is, they are a group of people who spoke a language related to that of Hebrew and Arabic. The Akkadians adopted most aspects of Sumerian cultures. Sargon created the world's first empire. An empire brings together several peoples, nations, and previously independent states under the control of one ruler. At its height, the Akkadian Empire extended from the Mediterranean coast in the west to the present-day Iran in the east. And after 200 years, Sargon's dynasty declined due to internal fighting, invasion, and severe famine. The Babylonian Empire. It is named after the capital that they established, and it is led by Hammurabi. He was a military ruler and a just and wise statesman. His most important gift to civilization was his written code of law, which included law that controlled all aspects of Babylonian life. Hammurabi's code expressed an important idea in Mesopotamian civilization. It emphasized the responsibility of the government towards its society. The Babylonians worshipped Marduk as their supreme god. Religion was also the center of the Babylonian life. Just like the Sumerians, they were farmers and they also raised domesticated animals. They also wove textile and were more enterprising than the Sumerians. And the social organization was made up of nobility, artisans, merchants, peasants, and slaves. Women were given the same stature as men. They could trade, enter profession, and even become priestesses. 2 centuries after Hammurabi's reign, the Babylonian Empire fell into the hands of Hittites. The Hittites was the first group of people who used iron for weapons. The greatest contribution to civilization was their human legal system. Under their law, capital punishment was reserved only for major crimes. It also emphasized payment of damages rather than retribution. The law also took into the account of process of premeditation or the condition of whether or not a person intended to commit the crime beforehand. Next is the Assyrian. The Assyrian, known as one of the most fiercest, cruelest, and most aggressive and most warlike of all the ancient people. This empire included almost all of the old centers of civilization and power in West Asia. With great efficiency, the Assyrians organized and conquered territories. The Assyrians' campaign added new territories to the empire. This campaign brought taxes and tribute to the empire and became an instrument of control. If a conquered people refused to pay, their cities were destroyed by the Assyrians and their people sent into exile. With this, the Assyrians developed an effective method of governing an extended empire. Under the rule of Tiglath-Pileser I, the Assyrian controlled a territory which extended from the Mediterranean Sea to the far north of present-day Turkey. They were the first people to work out an effective system of political administration. They collected heavy taxes to maintain their army, which was usually composed of paid soldiers or mercenaries. At the era of its greatness, the Assyrian made the city of Nineveh their capital. Nineveh became the Assyrian symbol of pride, and cruelty. And there are the summary of the major contributor in ancient civilization. First is the Assyrian to Mesopotamia. Their contribution was the agriculture and metallurgy. Next is the Aztecs. Their contribution was the geometry and astronomy. Egyptian, ancient architecture, art and writing, medicines, and surgery. Next is the Indians. Their contribution was the mathematics, astronomy, and medicines. Next is Greeks. Philosophy, weapons, naval warfare. Indus Valley Civilization. Their contribution was city sewage, drainage plans. Next and last is the Romans, which is their contribution was the political and social structure. Kingship and administration in ancient civilization. Sumerian, from 3500 to 2400 BCE, which led by Gilgamesh. Next is the Akkadian Empire, from 2400 to 2300 BCE, led by Sargon the Great and Naram-Sin. Next is the Babylonian, from 1800 to 1600 BCE, led by Hammurabi, Nebuchadnezzar II. Next is the Assyrian, from 900 to 612 BCE, led by Shamshi-Adad, Tiglath-Pileser III, and Ashurbanipal. Next is Persian, from 1800 to 331 BCE, led by Cyrus the Great, Darius I, and Xerxes I. Next is the Classical period. Achaemenid period. Achaemenid period, or also called as the First Persian Empire, and founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BCE, but on 530 BCE, Cyrus the Great was succeeded by his son Cambyses II, and by Darius the Great in 522 BCE. By the time of Darius the Great and his son Xerxes, the Achaemenid Empire was expanded to include Mesopotamia, Egypt, Anatolia, the southern Caucasus, Macedonia, the western Indus Basin. At around 475 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire ruled over 44% of the world's population, the highest figure for any empire in history. Next is the Hellenistic period. The Hellenistic period, considered as the Golden Age, it revolved around the conquest of Alexander the Great to rise of Roman Empire. After Alexander the Great died, his generals divided his conquered lands among themselves, and those fragments of the Alexandrian Empire had become three powerful dynasties, which is the Seleucids of Syria and Persia. The next is the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Antigonids of Greece and Macedonia. This three powerful dynasty was not politically united. Hellenistic stage ruled by kings. The kings had a cosmopolitan view of the world. They imported ivory, gold, ebony, pearls, cotton, spices, and sugar from India, furs and iron from the Far East, wine from Syria, and next is the Hellenistic culture. They spoke and read the same language, which is Koine, the common tongue. It was a unifying cultural force. No matter where the person came from, he could communicate with anyone in this cosmopolitan Hellenistic world. But many Hellenistic people joined mystery religions like the cults of the goddess Isis and Fortunes, which promised their followers immorality and individual health. Next is the Islamic Age. Muhammad in 610 CE or Christ era received the first verse of the Quran from Allah from Angel Gabriel. In 16 Next is the Islamic Age. In 570 CE, it is the birth of Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad is the prophet and founder of Islam. And in 1622, the Hira or flight from persecution in Mecca to Medina. He forced out of Mecca and began his guerrilla, moving his community of followers to Medina. Shortly after the Constitution of Medina was drafted, it established the first Islamic state. It focused on stability, freedom of religion, and justice. And in the year of 632 CE, Muhammad died in his mosque at Medina. The year 632 to 650, the rightly guided caliphs succeeded the prophet of ruling of the Islamic Empire. And in 636, Muslims brought Islam to Syria under Omar, which is the second caliph. 637 CE, Muslims reached Persia and Jerusalem under the second caliph, which are Umar. And about 638 AD, the Caliph Omar entered Jerusalem and granted its residents a covenant of peace and protection known as the Covenant or the Code of Umar. In 641 CE, Muslims conquered Alexandria, Egypt under the second Caliph Omar. 661 to 750, the Umayyad Caliphs ruled the Muslim Empire centered in Damascus. In 711 CE, Muslims crossed over the Spain through North Africa. And in 717 to 718, Muslims attempted to conquer Constantinople, then capital of the Byzantine Empire. They also advanced in Western Europe as far as France. In 750 CE, Abbasids became ruler of Muslims Empire with Baghdad as center. The Golden Age of Islam begins. In 751 CE, Islamic Empire reached China. Arab learns papermaking from Chinese prisoners of war. Papermaking helps advance learning throughout the Arab world through books. And 800 to 1100 CE, Muslims established regular trade caravans from across northern Africa. They gradually extended routes across the Sahara deserts into the West African kingdoms of Mali and Ghana of the gold and salt trade. Islamic trade network becomes very prosperous and facilitates the exchange of ideas and technologies among societies with which they trade. In 1055 CE, Seljuk Turks, who are Muslim converts living in Central Asia began to move into territories of the Byzantine Empire. Conflicts and hostilities erupt between Christians and Muslims. In 1096 CE, Crusades begin. Pope Urban II of Rome calls for all Christians to expel Muslims from Jerusalem and its surrounding region and from the Byzantine Empire. In 1258 CE, Mongols sacks Baghdad, killing the caliphs and many Muslims. In 1299, the Ottoman dynasty is founded under Osman I in Asia Minor, which is Turkey. Osman ruled until 1326 CE. In 291, the end of Crusades, Muslims defeated Christians and remained in Holy Lands. In 1453, Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople under the rule of Muhammad II. Ending the Byzantine Empire, the city is renamed Istanbul and becomes the capital of the Ottoman Empire. 1520 to 1566, Suleiman the Magnificent ruled as Caliph, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and increased its territory. The empire reached its peak in culture, art, literature, architecture, and law. The Ottoman Empire existed until the end of World War I in 1918. His father Sultan Salim I conquered Egypt and made end to the Mamluk Sultanate and took the title of Caliph from the last Abbasid Caliph in Cairo in 1917. The socio-economic of Islamic Age. The people living in the Islamic Age during ancient period had different levels of powers, depending on their religious belief, ethnicity, gender. The non-Muslim groups comprised protected class called dhimmis, who had to pay a special protection called jizya. Women's life varied greatly, depending largely on socioeconomic status and political context. The political and economic organization was different in urban areas and villages where tribe-states were common. That was the end of my report about the civilization in Southwest Asia. Thank you.
Chapter 4: Civilizations in East Asia. Lesson outline: China and Japan. The imperial dynasties of ancient China. The final phase of ancient China's history was characterized by the rise of strong, centralized states, which unified the Chinese people under a single imperial dynasty. The Qin dynasty emerged when one of the states into which China was divided conquered all the others and unified China under its rule. Its king took the title Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. The Qin dynasty is famous for imposing a rigid unity on Chinese society and in building an early version of the Great Wall of China. The Qin regime's very rigidity, however, made it a short-lived dynasty. It was brought down by regional forces which it had failed to tame and by a peasantry which it had ruthlessly exploited. Qin Shi Huang was the founder of the Qin dynasty and the first emperor of a unified China from 247 to 221 BC. He was Sheng, king of Qin. The Han dynasty. The next of these unifying dynasties, however, would rule China for some 400 years. This was the Han Dynasty, arguably the most important of all China dynasty. Under the Han emperors, the Chinese became so used to being ruled as a single nation that to this day they call themselves the Han people. It was under the Han that Confucianism triumphed to become the ruling ideology of China. At the same time, an inspired bureaucracy, staffed to a large extent by officials recruited and promoted on merit, and imbued with Confucian thought, came to govern China. Even the examination system for recruiting officials, which would came to play such an important role in Chinese life, can trace its roots back to this period. The end of ancient China. The Han Dynasty lasted until 220 CE, when it broke up into several successor states. Thus began a period of weakness for China, when no single dynasty was able to establish its rule over the whole country for several centuries. This opened the way for non-Chinese peoples from surrounding regions to establish their own states within China. This was a dark period in Chinese history, but by no means as dark as the period which followed the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in Europe. Society was disrupted, trade declined, and many cities were shrunk. But even in barbarian-occupied areas, administration staffs by Confucian-educated officials continued to govern. Chinese civilization was preserved intact until a few centuries later, new dynasties would once again rule the whole of China. The civilization of ancient China, the state, which is Confucian bureaucratic state, the mandate of heaven. Chinese rulers bore the title Son of Heaven. They claimed to be the heaven's representatives on earth. Emperors were viewed as sacred figures. To disobey them was to disobey heaven. The concept of Son of Heaven was closely linked to the idea, very influential in Chinese history, of the mandate of heaven. By this, a dynasty received divine authority to rule. However, it was believed that if emperors ruled badly or unjustly, their dynasty was liable to lose this mandate. In these circumstances, it was legitimate for rebels' attempt to replace the dynasty with a new one, which by dint of successfully seizing the throne, had shown that it now enjoyed the heaven's favor. China's social classes. The Shi class. The Shi class were the gentry scholars of the Zhou and Shang dynasty. They possessed certain privileges that other people were not given. These people were appointed as the civil services of the country. The Nong class. The Nong class were the peasant farmers who produced the food to sustain the society. They were valuable members of society. Also, landholders who were responsible for producing food and crops for themselves and the society. The Gong class. The Gong class people were composed of craftsmen and artisans. As per Chinese understanding, these people were considered the laborers. The Shang class. This is the lowermost class in the country. They were either traders, merchants, or women. Merchants were wealthy but not respected because they are indulged in themselves in trading and transporting goods. Philosophies. Confucianism. This taught that people must accept their place in society is to be harmonious. However, social relationships should be reciprocal. Thus, while a son should obey his father and the father should act considerately towards the son. The founder of Confucianism is Confucius, or Master Kong. The golden rule of Confucianism is that do not do unto others what you would not want others do to you. Confucianism are no Christ or supreme leader, no scripture like Bible or Quran, does not promote beliefs in God or afterlife. Taoism, also known as Taoism. The Taoists believe that a person must live in accordance with the flow of natures. Trying to change the way things are is futile. Has temples, monasteries, and priests who make offerings, meditate, and perform other rituals for their communities. The founder of Taoism is Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu. According to Taoism, the best way for a person to live is to submit to whatever life brings and be flexible. Tao Te Ching, Book of Poverty, presenting the simple way of following the Tao and living life at peace with oneself, others, and the world of changes. The three jewels of Tao: compassion, kindness, love, moderation, simplicity, fragility, humility, and modesty. Tao is four major principles. Tao, meaning the way the natural flows of life. Pu, the uncurved block. All of nature was its most powerful when it was in its original unchanged and natural form. Wu Wei, the art of doing nothing, go with the flow. T or D, virtue, inner power, integrity. Mohism, the philosopher Mozi believed that anything that helped people's welfare and contributed to peace was good. Anything that did not was bad. People should practice universal love and not live selfishly. Legalism, the most important thing was that the state should be strong. To achieve this, all people should obey the ruler and his officials without question. For his part, the ruler should do whatever it takes to strengthen the state, whether it is immortal or not. Japanese civilization. Beginnings of the Japanese civilization. Early Japan bore witness to ruralized settlements, loyalty to a centralist court, as well as the expansion of Kyoto, its ancient capital. The land that makes up the current Japanese archipelago has been inhabited for at least 30,000 years, and possibly even as many as 200,000 years. The relatively shallow seas that separate Japan from continental Asia were not even entirely formed when the first human beings settled in the area. However, after the arrival of man, sea level rose and ended up covering the former land bridges that joined Japan with the continent. Whether modern-day Japanese people are the descendants of these first settlers or not remains a controversial question. Up until the 1960s, the country's archaeological sites had not been extensively studied, which is why knowing the origins of the first settlers has not been yet possible. Even so, the theory that they came from the northern region of the Asian continent is commonly accepted, with these migrations happening over a long period of time. The period during Japanese civilization, which is the Jomon period, Yayoi period, Kofun period, Nara period, Heian period, Kamakura period, Muromachi period, Momoyama period, and the Tokugawa shogunate. Religion and thought. This religion arrived in Japan from Korea in the 6th century and was soon accepted by the Japanese court. Buddhism helped to buttress the emperor's power in relation to the local chieftains, who remained largely wed to the ancient worship of ancestral and nature spirits, which would eventually consolidate to form the Japanese religion of Shinto. Various Buddhist sects have arrived in Japan from Asia, above all from China, at different times. After the 12th century, the most popular of these was Zen, but other sects have continued to attract followers and have waxed and waned in popularity. Most of these have themselves become divided into various schools. Shintoism. The indigenous religion of Japan is Shinto, a term which means way of the gods. As its name implies, this religion revolves around the worship of numerous gods kami, and Japan is dotted with shrines to deities relating to the harvest or war or other facets of life. The word kame can refer to spirits of rock, trees, rivers, animals, places, and natural phenomena, but it can also refer to the spirit or sacred essence of such entities. Kame and people all belong to a unified universe in which the spiritual and material are deeply interconnected. So too is the past and present. And an important focus for Shinto is the maintenance of the link between the current generation and its ancient roots. Social stratification, samurai and the way of the warrior. Samurai, derived from the Japanese word subaru, which means to serve. Bushido, Bushido or the way of the warrior, is the guiding philosophy of the samurai: frugality, loyalty, martial arts mastery, and honor unto death. Samurai and the sword. Synonyms with the samurai bravery is the katana, or samurai sword, and Bushido dictated that this curved slender blade was the soul of a warrior. Not only master swordsmen, samurai were also proficient in using the yumi or long bow. Farmer. A farmer manages farms, ranches, greenhouses, nurseries, and other agricultural production organizations. Only 20% of Japan land is suitable for cultivation, and agricultural economy is highly subsidized. A major challenge facing Japan's agriculture is the aging of its farmers and the lack of interest in farming by young adults. Artisan. Artisans were the skilled workers and makers of handicraft goods during the Edo period. They were labeled a separate class beneath the samurai and farmers, but above the merchants. Artisans were the part of the common caste. According to official Confucian ideology, artisans were valued because they created something with their labor, but they were not as highly valued as farmers in the agriculture-based economy. The artisan class lived in its own section of the major cities. Shukonin is a Japanese word for artisan or craftsman, which also implies a pride in one's own work. Merchant. Merchants are the lowest class in the social ranking system in feudal Japan. Merchants were salespeople who bought and sold goods. They usually specialized in one product to sell, such as tea. Merchants, the bottom rung of feudal Japanese society, was occupied by merchants, which included both traveling traders and shopkeepers. Merchants were often ostracized as parasites who profited from the labor of the more productive peasant and artisan classes. Like feudal societies in Europe, the Japanese put the merchants at the bottom because it was felt that they produced nothing and lived like parasites off the labor of the other classes. In reality, the status and power of the merchants closely paralleled with their wealth.
Civilization of Southeast Asia. Geographically speaking, the main region of Southeast Asia is the mainland peninsula. We also have the archipelago, a chain of islands part of present-day Indonesia and the Philippines. The ancient mariners of this region called these Southeast Asian lands the Golden Islands, and the Southeast Asia is really a melting pot of races, cultures, and religion. People in this region were often cut off from one another due to geography. And of course, they all have some connection to the main Asian continent and ended up developing their own flair of culture and religion because few regions are unified by a single government due to geographical barriers. We don't see any massive empires, and these barriers encourage the development of distinct cultures, religious practices, and language, and this will be one of the biggest barriers to empire conquest. Vietnam is influenced by China by the 10th century of Vietnamese overthrow Chinese rule. The head come and controlled the region, and though independent, they remained influenced by China. They called themselves and developed a strong centralized government and adopted Confucianism. The connection of culturally, linguistically to the other region they really take a flair of China. Angkor similarly has a relationship to more influenced by India. This kingdom emerged in modern Cambodia. The kingdom was formed by Javavarma, who is a strong leader who finds the people and group together to Khmer people. Angkor was neverly conquered by the Thai in 1432. But what important here is they strongly influenced by Indian culture. Now, the Thai live on the frontier of China, and as they moved farther to the south, they conquered the Angkor. They set up their own capital at Ayutthaya. They adopted Buddhism and Indian political practices and kindly influenced by China, and by the time they're moving southward, conquering, they're strongly influenced by Indian religion, culture, so they blended their native indigenous culture, that is Indians. Burma was caused a big threat for many kingdoms and regions. The Thai were threatened from the west by the Burmese people who had migrated from the highlands of Tibet. So they have Indian influence. They are a pastoral people. They adopted farming in Southeast Asia. They converted to Buddhism and adopted Indian political institution. Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian archipelago, a different pattern emerged. The people of these different islands largely dispersed from Malay. It is believed that mainland peninsula comes from the main continent. The main thing that drives the Malay world is the trade. Trade was a major influence on the development of the regions. Particularly, one of the most commodities these people have is the spices. They quite hungry for the spices they provide. The state of Srivijaya near the Strait of Malacca, and one of the particular kingdom that emerged is the kingdom of Shelendra, emerged on the eastern Java. The most important here is the independent kingdoms. Unique in the Southeast Asia in general is the Malay Peninsula, were influenced by India. They depended on the trade to maintain their kingdom, and in the late 13th century, the kingdom of Mahapuhet was founded. This kingdom controlled most of the archipelago. By the 15th century, a new state emerged. After the Islam conquest, Muslim merchants settled in the region. By the 1400s, the Islamic State of Malacca developed, leading to the near total conversion of the region to Islam. Culture and religion. Chinese and Indian culture and religion influenced by the different regions. The most visible evidence of this is the architecture. The temple of Angkor Wat is the most example. Hindu and Buddhist idea moved into Southeast Asia in 1000 CE. New religious beliefs were blended by the old religious practices, uniting the Hindu gods with the local deities. Buddhism had little impact until Theravada Buddhism arrived. It taught that people did not need priests or rulers. It is an appealing concept. Buddhism is the most important religion in Southeast Asia, being the second largest religion in Southeast Asia after Islam, with approximately 205 million. Almost 38% of the world's Buddhist population resides in Southeast Asia. Thailand has the largest number of Buddhist population with 95% of the people following Buddhism, whereas Brunei has the least with only 13%. Buddhism throughout Southeast Asia comprises two main traditions, the Mahayana Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. Mahayana remains a relic minority in Malaysia, Singapore, and Vietnam due to tenuous Chinese influence, while the other countries follow the modern Theravada Buddhism. Islam is the most widely practiced religion in Southeast Asia, with majorities in Brunei, Malaysia, and Indonesia, with approximately 42 million Muslims, i.e. 42% of Southeast Asian's population. Most of them are Sunni and follow the religious law. Islam is Brunei's and Malaysia's official religion. Islam Islam arrived in Southeast Asia around the 13th century, long after Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism is considered as one of the oldest religions in the world, dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. Hinduism originated in ancient India around the 1st and 5th century. Hinduism was spread across Southeast Asia by Burman traders and priests from India and Nepal. The Hindu civilization largely influenced the languages, scripts, architecture, literature, and beliefs and artistic aspects of this nation. During this time, Mahayana Buddhism coexisted with Hinduism in many of the regions. Subsequently, Hinduism was replaced by Buddhism after the 14th century in no time except for a few regions like Bali, Indonesia. Christianity exists in Vietnam, Philippines, and East Timor, while remaining a minority in the other Southeast Asian countries. About 85% of Filipinos and 90% of Timorese are Roman Catholics. Christianity was spread throughout mainland Southeast Asia by the French missionaries in Vietnam, Spaniards in East Timor, and the arrival of Portuguese Dominican friars in the region. The Filipinos were easily convinced by the Spaniards to convert into Christianity because it offered a more structured belief system with no centralized power. Forms of government. Unitary. A central government holds nearly all the power. Example is the monarchy. People's Republic of the China is the communist. Japan's practice constitutional monarchy. Emperor of Japan is a head of state, and it is a symbol of a country with no political power, only a ceremonial duties. Diet, a two-house legislature that is elected by the Japanese people. Confederation is a local governments hold all the power and the central government depends on the local for its existence. The United Nations, the ASEAN, or the Associations of Southeast Asian Nations, regional group organized to help the member countries cooperate on economic matters, encourage cultural exchange, and to help keep peace and stability in the region. Federal. The power is shared among different levels of government. India is a federal government. Indian National Congress is a two-house legislature made of representatives elected from all across the country who are chosen in the general election in which all citizens 18 years of age or older are eligible to vote. Once the INC is elected, the majority political party chooses someone to serve as prime minister. Autocratic. The ruler has absolute power to do whatever he wishes and make and enforce whatever laws he chooses. Citizens do not have any rights to choose leaders to vote on law. North Korea is a communist. The ruler holds the office of Premier and the head of the National Defense Commission, two most powerful positions in the government. He rules as an autocratic dictator. Oligarchy, government ruled by the few. Political party or other small group takes over a government and makes all of the major decisions. People's Republic of China, leaders of this Chinese Communist Party control most of what goes on in the country. Democratic. People play a much bigger role in deciding who the rulers are and what decisions are made. Demos, which means people. Most of some rulers to society, but the goal is to live as much personal freedom as possible. the India, Japan, and South Korea practices democratic government. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.